Hi, Alan Stratton from Woodturning. I'm planning a couple of projects using inside-out techniques, and particularly the 3 or 6 stave inside-out, which gives you a different dimension to it than a standard 4 stave. They are a little bit harder to set up, so that's the purpose of this video, is to show you that. To accompany this, I have prepared some notes because the process is a little bit detailed. A diagram of how to cut it, and which makes the math trivial, and then step by step. If you follow the steps, you'll be fine. If you skip some, then really you're on your own. But essentially, the basics beyond anything else really is first a sled that will ride on your miter slot and that has the ability to clamp on it. So I'm using T-track here, so that's a sled that will ride on the slot just fine. Also need another fence for a depth stop. This one is just an L bracket with 2 slots in it and 2 partial miter slots. Now this is more versatile than what you technically need, but it does enable me to make sure it is parallel and use it for other projects. So these are adjustable so that I can do any angle in the end. So those are required. That's going to be absolutely required. Let's see, going down through my checklist there, you need your rip saw fence. It really helps if it's a precision one. And then when your saw is at the angle, which is 60 degrees off, cut a partial slot in another block of wood. This block of wood needs to be the same thickness as your sled, and I'll explain that more when I use it. And then a digital angle blade gauge such as this. We'll use it to check the angle of the saw and then use it to set the angle of the blade relative to the saw, not to gravity. And then a saw throat insert. I spared no expense on this one. Essentially, you can get as fancy as you want. I went for something that would accommodate all, but my sleds make up the difference for that. And then you need a scrap board, such as this, that has parallel edges so that you can set your depth stop. Get to that in a minute. And then when you then have all that gathered up and set up, then you need your wood. And look at the diagram that you have here. It helps to go ahead and surface the wood to begin with and then measure the thickness. In this case, my thickness is 1.33, and then I can calculate different things. The most important things are 2 things. One is that it is wide enough to get all my staves out of and still have some clamping territory. If your board's not wide enough, have its second piece, that's just fine, except that it needs to be to the same thickness, and that's important for the geometry of this thing. So this is wide enough, and I've calculated that the other key measure is the distance between the edge of the board, and we're going to cut off a little bit there, over to this point down here. Now that's the tricky part, so we'll pay close attention to that. So going down through the list, we've checked the board, we've checked the distance from fence to blade, and we have enough board width, and then we set the saw blade to 60 degrees. So here we go. That's where this will come in. We'll take out the old saw throat, put it in a safe place. This is probably optional, but I'll remove it for me, and then I'm going to insert the one that I spared no expense on here. The way this gauge works is that you set it on the fence, which is magnetic, which really helps, and then you set it to have it 0, which if you turn it on the blade, that's what it works. And then it helps to crank up your saw blade. I'll take that out again. to its maximum, and then put the clamp on. I'm going to turn it my way so that I can read it. And then make sure you're paying attention to what's called backlash. You want to approach the angle, which is 60, from one direction only, because there is always slop in threads. So I want to crank it to 60 degrees, but I want to hit it exactly at 60. If I go too far, I need to back it up 5 degrees, say, and then approach it again to approach it from one side only to be as accurate as possible. So I'm at 62, 61, 7/10, 6/10, 4, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Let's crank it over. There we go. 60 degrees. And then put that away. We're done. Then we'll put the throat back in. And we also need that. Okay, the height of this blade needs to be height of your sled and your stock. So that's not quite high enough now. So that should be just barely enough for blade height. So we've got the blade set. So now let's bring in this sled that rides the slot here. And I've calculated that the distance that I want for the cut to make is 2.304 for my width. So let's take that out of the way. Let's put this little plate in there and get this ready. We'll put this in here, our stock, and then bring up this, and maybe bring it back just a little bit so we have adjustment room. We can lock that down, be parallel, this is parallel, this is parallel, and then we'll cinch that just a little bit. Then I've set my calipers to my 2.34, and it's time to measure. So I'm not quite there. Let's loosen this since it's parallel and just tap it. That's further away. Need to go the other way. And so I'm going to take that to just where the distance between the edge of my fence equals the edge of that kerf, and that's good. So now I can lock down my fence, make sure everything is tight, wood's tight. Now, there's one step, oops, rip one side at an angle. So I've done that, but it's best to do that before you set up your fence or you'll be setting it up again. So that's my first mistake. I didn't follow my instructions. Okay, so we've got ripped first side, and now set the depth or the width of the stop, which we've just done now, cinched it all down. Now it's quite important, nice to do one thing here, not strictly required, but take the offcut that came from sawing your board there to the 60 degrees, take some double stick tape, take the flat side and take that. What we're going to do is to fasten that to the zero clearance throat plate, because mine is not quite zero clearance. That would enable me making a new one for every angle that I were to cut on my saw. So take this and take this out. It's done. We'll take that zero clearance thing and put it right in there pretty close. Fasten it down. And now the wood, when it's cut, should fall away from the blade a little bit more and prevent other disasters. Now, the wood is cutting up above the saw, so it will fall. And that's planned. Okay, so we've put the gauge, we got it, we've cinched the stop, and we've done that. So now we're ready for our first cut. So what do? Okay, put that in there. We can remove this since it's all been set already. You need to actually clamp this down. It also helps to clamp it near there, so a little bit of extra wood here to help brace it. I'm using hold downs that have a T-bolt. Okay, recheck everything. Tight, 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 tight. Don't forget your face shield. Keep your hands away. One. It also helps to mark which end is up, so we'll mark that. We'll take care of that nub later. So that's the end of the first cut. So let's slide it on over, loosen the hold downs, slide it on over to here, clamp it down again. Make sure this, well, even better is to move it clear out of the way. Down tight and recheck. Make sure your head's on, face shield's down. Bring this back, again loosen up, don't count on getting exactly the number of staves from your wood. You actually need this extra wood to be able to clamp to, so don't skimp, just make two. Set, think. Let's remove it totally this time. And here we go. And now we have our basis for an inside-out ornament, or a project of any sort. Ornaments I like. The angles are perfect. You can check that angle with a digital angle guide. Let's see how close we came. So do I set it at 60 or do I set it at 30? They're complementary angles, so the saw was 60, this will need to be 30. I guess it has to be 60. There we go. So we're all set. In the next couple of projects, we'll continue on from there to actually make an inside-out project. So just in review, we have our table saw. We are able to set the blade angle exactly using a magnetic gauge. If your saw is plastic or aluminum, that'll be up to you. We checked it in the end with another digital gauge. Our sled here has T-track hold down so that we can hold down the wood exactly in place. We had another depth gauge used for width that has just a fence and a couple of things on the back to ride the miter slot and a couple of slots ready to go. We measured with their calipers. We calculated all the appropriate distances on the cheat sheet, and we followed the directions step by step through the process so that we don't leave things out and have to make up for it later. So, scrap board that has parallel edges. You saw this now, that this enables me to measure from that edge to the fence, or the depth stop. We're good. So, there we have it. And we have our staves. Of course, if you're going to do a 6 stave, we've only done half enough, so, but it is the same process. Remember to wear your face shield, and we'll see you next week.